Great. We look forward to seeing everybody come through. Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you, guys. Okay, next is a report on closed session. There was no closed session, so we have no report to that. We'll move on to additional materials received. Sue?
Yeah, we did receive one additional material for item 8A having to do with the appointment of the Library Advisory Committee, and we received 2 additional materials on item 10A regarding the parking time limit in the village at 3 hours, and one for 10C regarding endorsing the county regional transportation commission 1/2 cent sales tax measure. Thank you.
Okay, and are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
Staff has no changes.
Okay, great. That'll take us to the public comment period. This is an oral communication where we allow members of the public to address the City Council on any item that is not on the agenda. Be allowed 3 minutes to speak. So if anybody would like to come up and talk about something that is not on the agenda, come up and please introduce yourself and sign in so we have your information. Looks like everybody's here for a purpose. Okay, good. Well, then we'll move on to City Council comments. Dennis?
No, good. Thank you.
Stephanie?
I think so.
All right. John? Councilman Termini?
Tell us about the science fair today.
I'll finish that. Today was the Soquel Middle School Science Fair.
Elementary school.
Elementary school, that's right. And I was accompanied today by Councilman Termini for a unique experience of judging, was it 4th and 5th grade? 4th and 5th grade science projects, and took me back in time to when we created volcanoes and melted ice with salt. But there were actually a few very unique projects there. And I would say a good time was had by all.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the good things we do in the community. So that's all. Any staff comments?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I did want to, while we are into an El Nino winter for sure, we have largely avoided the brunt, I think, of some of the damage that we've all been concerned about. I did want to call everyone's attention that we have suffered some damage here already this year. The stairs to Hoopers are now closed. Unfortunately, during a high wave event, the lower section of them were washed out. So you can expect, unfortunately, probably staff asking for some appropriation at mid-year to deal with that. In addition, a tree dropped in on Esplanade Park during another recent event. A pretty large eucalyptus tree damaged the retaining wall and the railing out there. And unfortunately, that retaining wall is going to need some work. So we are evaluating that, and at the mid-year, we may be asking for an appropriation to help deal with those.
Is there any plan for removal of the tree in the near-time future, or is it resting there?
There is, and we're going to be getting a little update from our Public Works Director here shortly about some other projects, and he can mention that.
Okay, great. It seems to be drawing people's attention right now, so it's good. So go ahead, Steve.
So the tree, we're trying to figure out the best way to get it out of there. It's, as you know, quite large. And so we're contacting a crane company, see if they could help us, or do we just pull it down on the beach and try and deal with it that way. So I know the crew's working on that. Haven't checked into them a couple of days on it, but I'll find out and let you know. We do want to get the tree out of there. But until then, we're hoping to keep the public out of there. I know there's going to be a surf contest up there, and we're making sure that it's secure up there, and we'll get it out of there as soon as we can. Yeah. So I just wanted to share a couple pictures with you of the new rampway at Rispin or Perry Park. That is 99.99%. We just have to put in some truncated domes at the very bottom of the picture here, and that project will be complete. And then the Vice Drain project, as we all know it, they did get the ramp poured at Stockton and Capitol Ave this week, and next week they will be repouring the curb and gutter over the pipe from David Ling's up to Vice. So hopefully, weather keeps cooperating here, we'll get that wrapped up here pretty soon.
And at our last rain, there was comments from the neighbors that it did not overflow
Yes,
onto the curb.
thank
So
you for
it would appear that it would be working at this point?
Yeah, I was down there during one of the heavy downpours. I don't know if it was the heaviest or not, but the pipe was about 3/4 full and operating, and there was no backup whatsoever. So certainly in that rain in the past, we would have had localized flooding there. So I think it's a definite improvement.
Amazing what a little slope will do, huh?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you for that report, Steve. Okay, with that, we're going to move on to boards, commissions, and committees, and I believe we still have a couple left. First one we'll deal with is the city's Library Advisory Committee, and as you recall, we selected, each member selected one member, and I was left with two members that I went to interview, and I was able to interview Ariel Gray, who you interview her also? Okay, and seems like a nice woman, and then I got contacted by Pat DiLeonardo, who said that because of complications in her life, she wasn't able to participate this time, which made the decision easy. So we're going to go ahead and place Ariel Gray on that committee. She's a young mom. Her and her husband live in Cliffwood Heights. They have a couple of small children, so should bring a great dimension for, especially at least the children's portion of the library. And she says she spends a lot of time up at Scotts Valley Library, so she's definitely motivated to be on the committee. So we'll make Ariel Gray the appointment for that commission. And then the last one is we have the Art and Cultural Commission. I believe we have a recommendation from the Art and Cultural Commission for a artist.
Yes, we do. The resident artist, we recommend reappointing Kim Hogan. She was formerly on the Art and Cultural Commission as the professional artist. She had to take a leave of absence, but she found more time in her life to do it, so she came in and applied, and we chose her as our selection.
And is that your motion?
It is my motion.
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously for Kim Hogan to be reinstated as the artist. Okay, that moves us on to the consent calendar. These are items that we deal with normally with all in one vote, as long as there's a consensus. Is there any items any council people would like to pull on the consent calendar?
I will move the consent calendar. Second.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public that would like to pull an item on the consent calendar? Seeing no one. Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. That'll take us to general government hearings, and the first item on our hearing is consider a resolution continuing the parking time limit in the village at 3 hours. And Chief Escalante.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. As you know, just a brief history, back in March of 2015 at the council's direction, staff was directed to do a test period, a trial period, if you would, of the parking time limits down in the village. And the reason why this came to council was we, as staff, were receiving complaints and concerns from visitors that they just didn't have enough time in the 2-hour time period to go down in the village, have lunch, and then shop. They would come back and receive a citation for the expired 2-hour time period. And so back in March, there was an adopted resolution for a trial period for the 3 hours, which we started in May of 2015 and ran through the end of September. In October, we came back to council. We didn't have all the data that we had wanted to collect. And so tonight, we have all that data for you and want to present that to you with a recommendation to adopt a resolution to continue the 3-hour time period. We also worked with our Traffic and Parking Commission. We sat down with them and presented the data to them. There was no recommendation. However, they did come up with a couple of good suggestions, which I thought was well thought out. One of which was to call village residents who have parking permits from 2014 and 2015 to see if there was any significant impacts, which we did. Before I get into that information, I'll give you all the data on our parking revenue and the citations. You can see we put a chart together comparing 2014 and 2015. And looking at the information, you can tell that the meter and pay station revenue specifically to parking zone A1, which is in the village, actually went up from 2014 to 2015. And looking at the citations, you can see that the citations were down quite well. We went 1,046 fewer citations in 2015 from 2014. When we have that drop in citations, obviously the fines that are assessed go way down. We had citation revenue was reduced by 75%, or approximately $40,000. The revenue was up 9%, roughly $24,000. So there was a net loss through that trial period of about $16,354. We also evaluated the sales tax receipts specifically for the village area. Understand that we cannot pull that information out because it comes in on a quarterly basis, and because May overlaps the quarter, we were only able to pull July through September. And sales tax receipts down in the village were actually up as well. So that was good news. And you can see the comparison from 2015 to 2014. In regards to the village parking permits, you can see that we've had fewer sales in 2015, but in 2014 we had quite a few sales of the village parking permits. And now I can kind of let you know as to the anecdotal information that I got from the residents who have village parking permits when I asked them and inquired about how they felt on the change from 2 hours to 3 hours, whether that had affected them or not. All of them were united and said that it was a good thing. They liked it. One person commented that whenever they had a visitor, they actually had more time to stay rather than going to move their car. I even polled some of the some of the businesses as well, and some people felt it was good. There were a couple of restaurant owners who were a little bit concerned. They felt as though they weren't getting the actual turnover, so I did want to mention that on their behalf. So with all this information, staff looked at how complaints have been through the year, through the same time period. That is also anecdotal information. We don't record every complaint that comes in. People will come in and be concerned about a parking citation they got for an expired pay station or meter violation, and they'll go ahead and pay it, but they'll still voice their concern. So logging those complaints is very difficult to track, so I don't have a specific number. But from talking to staff at the front counter who deals with the parking citations, they have all said that it was way, way down this year compared to the previous year. It's also worth noting that as far as the visitor habits, some of the information that we got was that it was extremely busy this summer. And some of that has to do with, believe it or not, the drought. If you think about it, the lakes were down, the reservoirs were down, people couldn't camp, they couldn't boat. They really didn't ski much the last 2 winters. So a lot of their sporting activity, or at least their transportation efforts, involved the beach area and the coast area. Gas prices were down, so they were able to travel more. So to try and make a connection to one or the other as to the improvements or the increased traffic in the village is kind of hard to say. I think there's several pieces that you have to look at. But overall, staff feels this was a successful trial period, and we've attached a resolution for council to consider to continue with the 3-hour parking. And with that, that concludes my report, and I'm available for questions.
Thank you, Chief. That was very thorough. Turk, question?
Chief, if we were to offer junior guard parents a parking pass for upper or lower beach parking for just the daytime hours, would that be difficult to enforce?
No, and we actually do that now. What we do is there's 2 sessions, session 1 and session 2 during the summer, and in each session there's a morning session and an afternoon session. So we do offer them a permit where they park in the lower beach lot, and they do take advantage of it, and they actually really, really appreciate it. We got a lot of positive feedback to try and pull people from the village so that there's more opportunities for people to go down there, use the restaurants, and use and shop.
And that's a free pass for them if they
That
are
is.
junior guards?
They were very much appreciative of that.
That's great. Thank you.
And just so you know, if I am in the morning session in group 1, my pass is not good for the afternoon session. So you can't park there all day, and it's not good for session 2. So it's during a specific time. But it seems as though we've gotten some good reactions and good feedback.
Questions? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the public. Anybody from the public like to address the council on the 3-hour parking? Hello, Karen.
That wasn't my neck. Good evening, Karen Hanna. First of all, I'll speak representing the BIA. I sent you all the survey, so I'm sorry I didn't get it to you sooner, but it was pretty short, pretty direct. For people who haven't seen the survey, we sent it out electronically. We received responses from about 25% of our membership. 70% of the responses were from retail and restaurants, because those are of course, the businesses that are most affected by traffic and parking issues. 70% of those people said that they had not seen a decrease in traffic congestion, which I think we all agree it was a pretty crazy summer. Approximately 50% of the respondents had flat or decreased sales, and 55% recommended that the City Council return to the 2-hour parking limit. Therefore, the BIA asked the Council to return to the 2-hour parking limit in the village. Also, 97% of the respondents recommended that the City Council implement additional parking management measures such as variable meter pricing, improved signage, and enhance alternatives to driving. And some of these things have been discussed at the Traffic Committee, and I think as technology goes on, they may be discussed again. So that's the official stand of the BIA, and request is to go back to the 2-hour parking. So now I'm taking off my BIA hat, and I'm going to speak personally as an individual in business and just hanging out in the village a lot. I think that 75% reduction in citations is pretty hard to ignore. I remember when you decided to implement the trial period, the number of citations that was issued was a huge factor. And certainly Capitola being, basically reviled for its parking issues, the biggest issue is the number of citations. And so if in fact we can really maintain this level of citations for the next few years, I would agree that the 3-hour parking limit should stay, and I never thought I'd ever hear myself say that. But I think that, emotionally, reducing that stress level and that anger of having citations out there is huge for all of us. And if it's not bothering the residents, and 50% or almost 50% of the businesses seem to be okay with it, it's kind of hard to argue. But I would hate to see the citation numbers go up, either because of a change in staffing or technology, so that, suddenly we find a way to capture more of these. Because having more in-depth conversations about why the citation levels might be down, there's a lot of factors, how long it takes to get around town, and whether or not they can really read some of the, some of the technology as they should. So I personally would like the council to consider extending the trial period for the 3-hour limit until next fall, so that we can, have another year's comparison and bring the issue back and just double check and make sure that we're really on the right track with this very positive result of this change. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Karen, have a question?
Thanks for your report. So the police chief did talk about some factors that may have contributed to the increase in sales tax for us. And no way to define, what actually led to that. The main one that we're focusing on, and you alluded to, is the fact that it was a very busy summer. And some of the things that contribute to that is it's a lot easier to come here now when other options are not available. So from your standpoint, do you have a take on that?
In our little survey that we sent out, it kind of echoed what I had just found from talking to other businesses, is that the retail businesses on the whole did not have a particularly outstanding summer.
Okay.
Were either flat. I think most of that flat or down is from retail. Most of the food services people I talked to had a very good summer. So, and that kind of goes along with, huge, crowds of beach people. They tend to sit at the beach, get something to eat, leave, that sort of thing. So, personally in my business, I'll be really honest with you, I never had one single person come in and go, oh, thank God it's 3-hour parking. Now I can do whatever. I mean, honestly, I got about the same kind of response, people looking at their little tag and making sure that they get back to their car in time. We had a really outstanding spring last year, and our summer business was down considerably. We were like 22% up for the spring, and we were down 9% over the summer. That's, that didn't make me particularly happy. But all that aside, if the people who are coming here are happy and they're leaving without a ticket in their pocket, I think that's a win. So, I just don't see how you can really, as long as we can keep those numbers in that kind of proportion. And apparently it gives the code enforcement more time to go up into the neighborhoods and enforce the permit parking. And that's a plus, because if they didn't have time before and it was stressing out the residents, and at least they get, they can get some of those cars, the people that figure out, ooh, I can park up here, and nobody ever comes up to enforce. And now if they're doing that with that extra time that they have, then that's also a positive result.
Yeah, that's a good point, definitely.
Thank you for your full circle analysis there. You can go. So who would like to, is someone else from the public?
I'll launch off. I think it's a great idea. I think we should go with the staff recommendation. I think we should impress upon the chief that we're not worried about the $16,000 loss in revenue. That's a small price to pay for all the letters that every single one of us get. And I didn't get one this summer. That's right. Not a single one. So thank you very much. We don't have to crank up the enforcement to make that money back. So it's okay. So I'd like to move the staff recommendation.
Second. Just under comments, my take on this was what works, because I personally, don't care whether it's 2 hours or 3 hours. It's what does it work for everybody? And that's the answer. I mean, that's the answer to most of our problems. That's the problem, and how can we fix it? And does it work? I do have to tell you, I hated it when I was mayor and I'd get an angry letter saying, I'm never coming back to Capitola. I got a ticket and I spent $300 at dinner and I bought this and I bought that. Well, I sent one person some money. And I said, please come back to Capitola. Sorry you got a ticket, but please come back. I'm sorry that you're mad. She called me up. She said, next time she's in town, could we have dinner? I said, no, I'm a very busy person, but I do want you to come back and spend your money. So please do. But the response is, I've called people, I've done I did other little things like that. And sometimes just having somebody call them and listen to them, then they say, oh, well, maybe I did get back a little late or something. But yeah, it just feels so awful to have to, there's not that many people that get that angry. But you hate to see it in a tourist town like this. We're coming here to have a good time. Yeah.
To me, citations down means a lot more happy visitors here. And that was the main thing that I found out when I did my informal survey before we did the trial, that a lot of people were complaining to business owners and such. So I definitely support this. And thank you, Carm, for doing the survey with the BIA. I appreciate that. And I also appreciate you taking off your hat and giving us your personal comments. Thank you very much.
Councilman Morton.
I haven't heard one thing that convinces me to go back to 2 hours. Even the BIA survey bounced out a lot of discussion there. It's worked. I would suggest that we go to a 2-year review on this. It's a lot of work for staff to take this thing up every year. So a 2-year review would be fine.
Your motion was to permanently adopt a resolution. It wasn't. Was there a review included in that?
Staff recommendation was I would easily accept a friendly amendment to have a bi-yearly review, but mine was to keep it at 3 hours, and that was the staff recommendation.
That's what I thought.
And my motion.
Right. But before we have the vote, I just want to weigh in. When this came to us last year, I actually voted against it because I was felt like I was supporting the position of the BIA and that it would actually not work. And I think that the numbers, Karin, thank you again for that survey, because the numbers just show that the BIA itself is unsure which way it wants to go. Okay, the 50-50 is not decisive for us to make a decision. And I think the thing that really brings me, as we all have said, I'll just say it again, is the prosperity that we bring to our town by having our citations being reduced And our reputation is, we couldn't spend $14,000 and get that much good PR. So I think with that, and I think the reassurance for the BIA, Karen, is that I think we're always going to be looking at the statistics and the numbers, whether we do it formally or informally, and if the motion is for 2 years or 1 year. We're always aware of what's going on in the village. We're always trying to see how that works. I think the chief has offered a great option for the junior guards. That was a big concern about where they're going to park. And if they embrace that program and park in the lots, that could free up a lot. The only other anomaly that exists there is the surfers, and just we don't control the waves. And, we are a beach town, so it's part of who we are. So with that, I'll call.
I am amending my motion.
Okay.
Hopefully it's good for the second to have a bi-yearly review. But also, I think we should take seriously and bring back at some point in the next year, the recommendations from the survey were very to the point, and they had some good ideas there, and anything we can do to help everything flow is.
Maybe we can get Karen to do a survey. You yourself could do the survey, Mike, and see how. Yay, Karen. Okay, you're not going away.
Well, the recommendations that you've done already and received comments on, those are very positive.
Can I ask her recommendation, though, on 1 year or 2 years? I like your idea of let's looking at it after the summer and see.
I just looked at a pretty comprehensive report with a lot of data, and I'm not even going to look at our chief wincing. I think that 2 years doesn't bother me at all, but I don't think it's a deal breaker for anybody.
No, it's just
We're
counting
continuing
up
to
the
look at
amount of citations.
Citations is fine. I mean, we just don't need so many pie charts and bar charts and circles and arrows.
So just for clarification, the motion is to adopt staff recommendation and a 2-year.
Right, with a yearly report on citations.
Are we clear?
I'll second that motion.
Motion.
I agree to the
And
amendment.
how do I say it? So we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? No. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Chief, very much for that report. Takes us to the review, the comprehensive annual financial report for fiscal year and the Housing Successor Independent. Mr. Welch. Is this yours?
Yes, Mayor, members of council. Before I begin looking at the comprehensive annual financial report, we'll do a brief overview today. I just want to let everyone know the CAFR document is on our website under the finance department if people are interested in getting more information. A hard copy is also provided at the library and at the front desk at City Hall. So today we're just going to do a brief overview, kind of a high-level overview of where the city stands financially. We'll look at the overall city position. We'll talk a little bit about a government accounting standards board change. The main change was that we show our pension unfunded liability on our financial statements. We'll look at the general fund net position and just briefly look at the general fund revenue, where we ended the year. So when we look at the overall city net position, we're looking at what's the difference between our current assets, the city's assets, and our liabilities. Last year, we ended the year with a net position of $9.2 million, a positive $9.2 million. This increased about $1.4 million from the prior year. So as of June 30th, 2015, the city had about $35 million in assets and deferred outflow resources. And we had just over $26 million in total liabilities and deferred inflow resources for that $9.2 million net position. One thing you may notice is our net position is $9.2 million, and I keep referencing that we've increased about $1.7 from the prior year. If you look at a prior CAFR document, our previous net position was just over $23 million. The reason we increase is we restate that prior year net position, showing what it would have been with our pension liability, which was about $15 million at the end of 2014. So in the course of 1 year, the city's pension liability decreased a little bit over $4 million. This was due to a very good return from CalPERS investment. They returned about 18%, thus reducing our liability. CalPERS is trying to return 7.5%. That would be pretty much a zero return if they got 7.5%. So that 18% reduced our unfunded liability quite a bit. One thing to note is when we go to do our CAFR for the current year, our net position is most likely going to decrease because we're going to have a return from CalPERS of about 2.4%, which in other words is about a 5% decrease in our net position. One of GASB's really fun changes were we show deferred inflows and outflows on our financial statements. They wanted to confuse everyone, I think, on our unfunded liability as much as they could. So these deferred inflows and outflows are current year expenditures and kind of like what we would consider a revenue on the liability. It's an interesting topic if you guys ever want to discuss in more details. When we go to the general fund, our net position is $7.6 million. That increased about $1.2 million from the prior year. One of the main changes is the increase in our reserve levels. So we increased the reserve levels for our contingency and emergency reserve, thus increasing our assets. We're holding more cash, for future unseen events. And our unassigned fund balance, so things that aren't assigned for any specific purposes, increased $600,000 last year. Just briefly looking at our revenue sources, we're largely based around property tax, sales tax, and our transient occupancy tax. All those showed improved performance over prior year. One thing to note is our transient occupancy tax shows a slight increase. It's about a 1% increase in terms of real collections. If we look at normalizing that based on the refund that we issued last year, we are about 12.5% increase in TOT collections. And overall, we collected just over $16 million last year. And we only expended 14.6, so that's where we got the 1.4 increase. And you can see our largest expenditure as a city is on public safety, which is about 45% of the general fund expenditures. And that ends the overview of the CAFR. The next steps is we'll bring back our current year, how we're doing currently. All our revenue are above what we projected in terms of the budget. We'll review that on February 25th and come back with any adjustments that are needed. Be happy to answer any questions that you guys have.
Any questions for staff? John?
Yeah, I have a question about the TOT negotiations. I assume that's over with and there's a program that's going to go forward so that we don't get into that position again. I was just wondering if you could comment on that procedure and how that turned out.
Correct. The TOT issue has been resolved, and we've put in safeguards to ensure it won't happen in the future.
Okay. So, it should be noted that it was an error on the part of one of the hotels. The way they were calculating their revenue, they inadvertently paid us too much money. So, yeah.
But the issue there was it went on for so long, and no one caught it. So we must have some joint handshaking here or something.
Yeah, we actually get a lot of data from them now monthly.
Okay.
Yeah.
I will note that staff, city staff, actually alerted them to it several times before they finally caught the error because the numbers didn't look right for a while. So we were definitely looking at them. We continued to inquire with them about how they looked, and at the end of the day, we finally came to the position that we were going to have to audit it to explain the numbers. That's when they took a harder look and discovered the error. Okay. But now we do receive far more information than we did before.
Any other questions?
Yeah, that's it.
So there's no motion, it's just receiving the report?
Yes.
Okay, great. That'll move us to our next item, which is the consider endorsing the investment plan by the RTC.
Mr. Mayor, I would recommend that we continue this to the last item on our agenda because George had asked to go after 8 o'clock, and I wasn't anticipating that we would move as quickly through the agenda. So.
I don't think any of us was anticipating moving as quickly as we are, so we'd be happy to accommodate. We'll move to item D, which is the Community-Based Health and Human Services Program fiscal year. And Mr. Laurent.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. So we're here to talk about the Community-Based Grant Program. Kind of give you an overview. The City of Capitola, we participate in the countywide common application. It allows community groups to make one application to multiple jurisdictions so they don't have to repeat work. And we've been using that for a number of years. It's through the county. I think all the cities participate to a certain extent. The city has awarded grants to over 30 community groups. Those numbers change a little because they've merged and separated, so that's about the average. 2014, the city implemented a 2-year grant cycle, so that's the last time we've come before you to open up grants. So the recommendation was a 2-year grant cycle. They were approved and for 2014-15, and attached to that 2-year contract was a cost of living adjustment for 2015-16. So they did not know, we didn't receive applications last year because they just ran forward with a 2-year. So based on that, in 2014-15, the city awarded about $269,000 in grants, and the next year with the cost of living adjustment, that went up to $277,000. In 2014, the city created an ad hoc subcommittee to review what we were doing. And the first recommendation was what was implemented in 2014, and they went to a 2-year grant cycle. In 2015, the group met 4 different times and to try to figure out ways to better manage the program. And 2 of the recommendations that came up were just basically, in the past, the budgeting and the allocation of that amount occurred during the budget process. The recommendation was to separate that, for the council to determine the budget of the program during the budget cycle, and then after that's decided, come back and determine the allocation of those funds between the different agencies. And just that does work with the current program. We have time. They will still put the applications in during the time period, which is basically the month of February. So it allows us to review it at a separate time and maybe spend more time deliberating that as opposed to doing it during the budget process. The next recommendation is that the program should be budgeted at $275,000 for each fiscal year 2016 and fiscal year 2017-18. The subcommittee with those recommendations has completed their process and is no longer going to meet. So the recommended action today is to adopt the recommendations of the ad hoc subcommittee, as well as determine whether or not to open up the program again this year, as well as determine if new organizations should be allowed to apply for grants. So after that, I take questions.
Any questions? Okay, I'll go ahead and open up to the public. Anybody from the public like to comment? Mr. Cancino, step forward.
How's it going? It's Rick Cancino from Community Bridges. Just wanted to extend our thanks to the council members for your continued support of Health and Human Services. You guys have been really strong allies here in Capitola and also for the county. So extension to you guys to continue that. I think a $275,000 investment in the community is commendable, so I just wanted to thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the public like to comment? Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council for a discussion. And
well, you and I were on the subcommittee, Ed, and hopefully that the council appreciates what we think maybe wisdom in this, so that at budget time we're talking about just a single line item number, what we feel we can afford, and that we can worry about allocation line item by line item outside of the budget cycle, but still soon enough so that our community organizations can plan. And the 2-year seemed to work really well, saved us a lot of time, and helped our community organizations so they knew they could plan 2 years into the future. So, reluctant as I am to move our own idea, I'll move the recommendation for using this process from here forward.
What about new groups? You didn't make a recommendation about that? Some years we have, I think we have most years.
I think we sometimes we do, sometimes we don't, sometimes we have groups drop off. I think that situation we should take at the time later in the year when we look at the individual line items and weigh it. It needs to be case by case. I don't know that we can just flatly say no new groups. Because again, sometimes we'll have some group fall off and we want to pick a new group up.
Well, the other thing, it has been 2 years since anyone has applied.
Right.
So there may be some changes in the makeup of the community grants. So
I'd like to be able to say for stability, no new groups. But we could wind up in the middle of this year saying, gee, there's a group that doesn't
I know,
exist anymore.
I know. It feels more inclusive
Yeah.
to be open, even though it's more work and it maybe raises people's hopes, and we're not going to fund them, but I think it's a good process.
Yeah,
Just to be
it
open
is.
to the community,
It is.
who wants to apply for funds. Maybe we'll have some new groups, maybe we won't.
No.
We'll take a look at them and we'll see, but it
But
just
knowing
seems-
full well that once we set the spending limit, if any new groups are brought on, it will impact the other groups. So,
Well, or unless the limit is increased. Oh, and I'll talk about that when we get there,
Well,
in the
that-
budget.
at budget time,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the time to argue the amount.
Right,
So-
right, because we had an increase in funds last year,
Gross amount.
and we didn't give them any increase last year, so we might want to talk about a COLA
We gave them
this
a
year.
cost, we gave them a several % increase automatically last year.
Right, but they hadn't gotten a cost of living for like 10 years, I don't think. So, we still have playing a little catch-up. So
Yeah.
we'll talk about that during budget sessions to see whether we can give them a COLA or not. Mm.
Dennis, you comment?
Larry, what's the application period?
Application period, I believe, opens January 29th, tomorrow, and it runs through the end of February.
I agree with you, Stephanie. I think we should go ahead and open it up. In all fairness,
Okay.
there may be a new group that's doing good in the community we haven't looked at. So I think we should go ahead and, not leading people on that there's room for it, but the fact that we're open to new funding if that's possible.
I definitely agree with Stephanie and Dennis on this. But I do have a different question in terms of the cost of living. So I note the amount is going to be the same for 16, 17, and 17, 18.
Well, I don't know that we have determined the 17-18 amount yet.
Well, it says right here.
That was the recommendation.
The recommendation, but that is still in the budget negotiation time. So this is, I'm in no way trying to set a budget limit with this motion, merely the process.
Okay. So,
Sorry, I included that, and I should have been
Okay.
excluded.
so at budget time, we could entertain an increase for cost of living.
Because we won't know what our financial position is. We'll know a lot better at budget time after mid-year. If we want to increase it by a little, by whatever percentage, maybe so, maybe not, but that's for discussion at budget, not now, I think.
Okay. So as Stephanie brought up, then that will be open at that time. Okay.
But only that item, not who gets what.
Well, I think
How
what
much?
what I'm going to ask you to do, if you don't mind, is I'm going to separate these two, and we're going to have two separate items that we're going to
Okay.
vote on, okay? I would just like to deal with one. Number one is adopt the recommendation of the ad hoc committee for the numbers, if that's, if your
The process?
process. Is your motion okay with that?
Yes.
And was there a second on that motion?
I second it.
So we're just going to vote on the process, adopt the recommendations of the ad hoc committee. So everybody clear on what we're voting for?
Is that what we're reading right here as a recommended action?
The two-step process, which is set a gross amount during budget time.
Okay.
And determine the line items later in the year. That's the only part of this motion.
Okay, the second sentence in here deals with opening up to other.
I'm going to break that off into a separate motion.
Oh, separate motion, okay.
Okay, so on the first motion for adopting, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries unanimously. And then part two is go back to the, where was part two? Is it on there? Okay, this is where we're going to determine whether or not new organizations are allowed. Was there a motion on?
I'll move that we open it to new organizations.
And is there a
Second that.
second? Okay. So everybody clear on what we're voting on? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, great. Okay, with that, we conclude base health. Brings us to consider a resolution endorsing the investment plan developed by the Santa Cruz RTC for a half-cent sales tax.
I'm here strictly as an introduction to George Dondero, who's the Executive Director of the Santa Cruz County Regional Transportation Commission. They're working on a ballot initiative for make us a self-help county in the transportation business. Right now, the county as a whole, all the jurisdictions and the county itself is heavily dependent on state funding, and state funding is getting more and more difficult to acquire for any transportation project, whether that be a local road or a regional transportation project. The majority of the counties in California, I believe, are self-help counties, meaning they tax themselves. We get to keep that money in the county and identify it for projects. So I'll let George explain the details with you, but something I think we have great interest in. So, George?
Welcome, Mr. Dondero.
Well, thank you. Pleasure to be here, council members, and thank you, Steve, for the nice introduction. So I have a brief presentation tonight to sort of walk you through what we're asking. As Steve said, most of the urbanized counties actually all of the urbanized counties in California, representing about 84% of the population, have already done this. They have at least one measure in place. Some of them have more than one. Santa Clara will be going for their 5th measure this fall. It's imperative that this county start to catch up. Our transportation needs are really starting to build and accumulate, and so we can't just keep letting that happen. So what our commission has done is started to take the actions to put this measure on the ballot. So what we're calling this is a transportation investment plan. It was also referred to as an expenditure plan. Same thing. Okay. So to set the context, our local transportation network is extensive. We have 7 state highways in the county, over 900 miles of roads, plenty of sidewalks and bike lanes, 32-mile rail corridor, which the commission now owns, 35 bus routes, and paratransit service throughout much of the county. About 74% of the people live and work here in the county. About 26% commute of the workers, not of the population, commute out of the county. Many of those folks, of course, go to Silicon Valley for work. And about 11% of our workers actually commute into the county each day. Average typical traffic count on Highway 1 on a normal weekday is around 100,000 vehicles. That's counting both directions. Our bus system carries about 5.5 million riders per year, and our paratransit services carry about 96,000 riders per year, and I think that's each, one's for Metro and one's for community bridges, and Mr. Cancino can correct me if the numbers aren't quite right, but I think they're pretty close. So what are our challenges? Well, they're great. And we identified those in our regional transportation plan, which the commission adopted 2 years ago, June of 2014, that identified all the projects that the cities and the county would like to see built or improved for the next 20 years through the year 2035. And of course, we all know that the need always exceeds the money available. And part of the requirement to do this regional plan is to identify how much money we expect to see available through the sources that we know of that we traditionally use. And we came up a little bit short. We only have about half, identified about half of the money that's going to be needed. So that means a lot of projects will just have to go unfunded. There's another disturbing trend in that the revenues are continuing to drop. Our state legislature never saw fit to index the fuel tax to inflation. Instead, it was per gallon tax, and as fuel economy increases and people tend to drive more, that's VMT, stands for vehicle miles traveled. You can see we got this widening gulf. This is a schematic. It's not, the projections are not necessarily accurate, but it gives you an idea what the trend is, that our revenues are dropping as our amount of driving increases over time. So the fuel tax has become a less and less reliable source for transportation to fund it. So in our regional plan, we're required to develop the financial element, which shows where the money is going to come from and and what uses we can put it to. So you can see that a lot of the money is earmarked for specific uses. Okay, those are the dedicated funds on the left in the blue bar. So the amount of discretionary money that the commission has available is pretty small. And if we pass this measure, you can see the red bar on the right will give us some discretionary money. and that's what you're going to be voting on tonight. It's imperative to have some discretionary money. Most of the state and federal money that we have now is just, we really don't have much choice. You can't use transit money for streets and roads and vice versa. And I know Dennis and Ed are very familiar with this, and any of you who have ever served on the commission know. So we've been making plans to put a ballot measure of November of this year. And some polling was done very recently to encourage us to do that. So we identified five different buckets or categories of funding for this measure, because the voters aren't going to vote for this unless they know where the money is going to go, and neither would you. So one of the things that we looked at for local streets and roads is, what is your pavement condition index? That's the PCI. Happy to report that your city is up there ahead of some of the others. The dotted line at 70 is sort of the target where you would like to be. That's considered really good condition. And then you can see the bar on the left breaks it down as you drop down to lower and lower numbers. So you're doing quite well here in Capitola, but it's a constant thing. You have to maintain that. So there would be money in this measure that would allow you to continue to do that, as well as make improvements if you had a roundabout project, for example, or bike lanes, or striping, or anything that qualifies. There's a whole long list of project types that would qualify for using this money. So the choice will be up to you where you want to direct it, as long as it's within those project types. The next largest, and 30% of that money will go to what we're calling neighborhood projects or local projects. The next largest bucket is 25%, which would go to the Highway 1 corridor. The green boxes on the left are the projects which we've completed. Starting at the far left was the Mission Street widening back in 2005. Then at the Fishhook, what we called the merge lanes, which made the merging safer. That was completed in 2008. And then the last project we built, which, by the way, Rtc contracted for all the design work and construction management on that project. And that was completed in 2013. And that was the Soquel-Morrissey auxiliary lanes. Auxiliary lanes are not, in a pure sense, considered capacity increasing, because they don't give you through lanes. However, we know that from experience that they do really improve traffic flow. So the next projects that are planned and that would be funded through this program are the orange box, and then the next two red boxes, which are the next three sets of auxiliary lanes. The one from Soquel to 41st would include a bike pedestrian overcrossing at Chanticleer. And then, let's see, the next one would have a bike ped crossing, I'm sorry, the last one to the far right that goes out to State Park would have a bike ped crossing at Mar Vista. So these are places where the neighborhoods have essentially been separated by the highway, and this would help reconnect the neighborhoods so that kids and anybody who wanted to walk or bike one side to the other wouldn't have to cross at those dangerous interchanges. And let's see, that just shows where the crossings are. There's also money, 16% of the money would go towards paratransit service in the county. We know that there's a strong need for that countywide. 14% would go towards maintaining the rail line, also fund the environmental impact study that would look at very closely whether or not the county wants to actually go forward with passenger service. It would also fund a new bridge here in Capitola, crossing the creek. We know that our engineers' reports have told us that we are going to have to replace that bridge at some point. And we could make it wide enough to handle both the trail and the trains at the same time. So that's included. Also, a contribution towards a new station at Pajaro Junction, which is on the line that Monterey County is going to extend commuter service down from San Jose into Salinas. Why would we put a station there? Well, it would serve the residents at the south end of our county well, and give them access to the job markets up in the, Silicon Valley. Most of the people that would use that station would probably come from the Watsonville and southern end of the county. And then there's 15% also for bike pedestrian projects for the Monterey Bay Sanctuary Scenic Trail Network. I just came here from an open house over in Santa Cruz showing off the drawings for the segment that's going to run from the Santa Cruz Wharf out to Natural Bridges Drive. We've funded so far 8 miles of this project on the rail line, and the Land Trust of Santa Cruz County has been a very active funding partner, helping us leverage grant money for that, so that project's moving along. It will also fund the maintenance of the trail once it's built during that time period. Very important. So a poll was done back in May of last year, and 73% of likely voters in the next election said they would vote yes or lean towards yes in supporting a measure. So there was about 4% that was undecided. There'll be another poll taken probably in the March timeframe to make sure these numbers haven't shifted and to learn a little bit more about the voters' preferences. So you know, there's a lot to work on together to get this thing launched. We need everybody's help, and we hope that we can get your help to endorse the expenditure plan. It was included in your agenda materials. We do need you to jump in. So I thank you for your time, and I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions? Mike, George?
Yes, Mike.
Were you privy to the letter from Community Bridges regarding lift line and the distribution of funds?
Yes. I just saw it today.
Could you address that concern? Because, you know, lift line is near and dear to us.
Yeah.
They provide tremendous service, and yet it seems like they're being left, forgive the pun, by the roadside.
It's difficult for me to address it tonight. I will say that I just got a copy of the letter today.
Okay.
I will say that if any changes are to be made to this expenditure plan, that the full RTC will have to weigh in on that. And I haven't been able to talk to them yet to see if they have the inclination to do that. I think they need to look at the information that was provided by Liftline and make that decision. Of course, there is time that they could do that.
And since it's in that category of pot of money,
yes,
it would be no problem, you know, doing some negotiations down the road. We wouldn't need a revamp of the measure, no doubt.
Hopefully not.
Right. What I'm saying is it's the same flavor, so it seems that it should be.
That would be one way to do it.
Okay. Good. And my other question is, I dearly want this to pass.
Okay.
And I want to vote for it tonight.
Okay.
I have grave concerns because the most vocal voices I've heard of opposition about it has been with regard to the small percentage going to the rail.
Yes.
And I worry that all it would take would be a small amount of effort to move you from that 73% to 65%.
Yeah.
What's the feeling of the RTC on that?
The RTC is.
I hope you're nervous.
Is very. We're very concerned about. We know we could lose that margin. Okay, we know that that's a real possibility. Our consultants told us that. They said one thing they did was they tested. After giving people some information, they got the 73%. Then they gave them some negative information about what people who would oppose a measure might say, and then they did the same thing with positive messaging. It was interesting that it didn't fluctuate much at all. I mean, within the margin of error of 4% on the survey, it really didn't. I mean, it stayed right above 70%.
Okay.
So that tells us that the voters really get it. They understand we need to do something now. Okay, so that's one thing in our favor. In order to make sure that, though, that we maintain that support that we need, the Commission next week will be approving 2 contracts for consultants to help us get the messaging out there and help do the educational effort that people need to understand how severe the problem is. Because a lot of folks really, frankly, don't know. They really think that somebody up at the state's holding on to the money, or somehow we just aren't spending it fast enough, or we don't know where to put it. You know, I mean, it really is a crisis. Just to demonstrate that, just the other day I got a copy of a letter from the California Transportation Commission. This is the body that's 11-member body that's supported by the governor and the legislature to oversee funding in the state, and they allocate money on a regular basis to all of us, the regional agencies. Very simple letter to the legislature. We're in a crisis. Do something now. And it was signed by all members of the CTC. I've never seen them do that. Now, the legislature has, I don't quite understand why they're having such a hard time. The governor created, a special session in September because they couldn't get through their regular session. He's now introduced something in his budget. We'll see where that goes. But if that goes, it'll be good, but it's not going to fill the need. We've got a lot of catching up to do. So it will help the state system a lot. It might help the locals a little bit, but what we need is our own money under our own control. But back to your question, yes, we're going to bring these consultants on board to help us really do a good job of delivering the messages to the public. We know we're not marketing experts. We're government folks, you know, and we try and do good planning and manage the money responsibly, but we know we need a little help in that arena. So that's part of the answer. Okay. I will also say we're getting endorsements from many organizations. Ecology Action, one of the most well-respected environmental groups in the county, recently their board voted unanimously to endorse this measure. We expect the major business groups will do the same. They haven't actually taken that action yet. The Visitors Council, which is now Visit Santa Cruz, they did as well. So we're in the process of gathering momentum here, and so you're the first city on my whistle stop tour here. So.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Sure. Got questions?
Yeah, I too support it. I do agree with you, George, that this is a great need for Santa Cruz. I appreciate the process that you've gone through to try to address multiple issues that we have, not just one or two. So I think that is going to be the success that will help this get passed. I would like to address what Mike brought up. I do have concern about the services that Santa Cruz provides for the seniors and frail in this community, and getting them from home to a doctor's appointment or home to, where they have to shop or wherever they need to go, because these are people that cannot do that on their own. There's a real need there. And I'd like to also point out that this is a need that's only going to increase. As we age, as the golden tsunami becomes even more golden, this is becoming a more and more unavoidable issue, let's put it that way. So I do hope that you look at Raymond's letter and evaluate their concerns, and I think they're very real concerns.
Okay, thank you.
My other question is around the EIR. What's the timeline for that, and when would the public get access to that information?
The EIR for the Highway 1 corridor?
Yes.
Yes. The comment period is now closed, and it closed on the 25th. We'll be working over the next few months to sort those comments and address them. And then it has to go through a very extensive review process at Caltrans and then Federal Highways. before it comes back to the commission to certify it and approve it.
Okay, will that coincide?
It will be after it will not come back out, the final will not be available before the election, unfortunately. We've been working for years on this and trying to make those things coincide, and it just hasn't worked. But we did get the draft out so that at least people understand the basics of what the project is. There's some flaws in the report. We know that. Some people have already pointed those out, and those will be corrected. But
okay. Yeah. So I assume we're going to be sharing costs on the new station, proposed new station, Watsonville?
Sharing costs? Oh, yes, with Monterey County, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. I think it's a $23 million project, and we've committed to put up $10 million.
$10 million,
yeah.
Okay. And my final question is on the poll in March. So my understanding is that the amount in each bucket is somewhat reflective of how polling went.
Yeah, actually multiple polling and also years of gathering information from our board and previous boards on what the needs are, and lots of needs assessments and so on. I mean, it's we also vetted this plan. Actually, we started almost 2 years ago, taking it to different groups, and then we took it to our commission at two separate retreats, one last year and one in 2014 and one in 2015. And so the reality is there's not enough money to completely solve any problem that's in there. So how do you do the best job you possibly can to balance those needs? And what you see before you tonight is a result of that very extensive vetting process, listening to the public, listening to our board, and actually our board did make some adjustments to it recently. So I hope that answers your question.
Well, it does in one way. Supposing the poll shifts a lot that's in March, will that adjust the amounts in the bucket?
If it does, I think our commission then would take a hard look at it. Based on what the first poll told us, we're right in the ballpark. We think we're pretty close to what we need. You really can't poll for exact percentages when you got 5 different pieces to a measure. I mean, the average voters, they don't know enough about transportation funding to answer those questions. But you can poll for how strong their support is for specific types of projects, and that's kind of what we go on. And what we found is that those who rated, let's say, the rail trail or passenger service on the rail line as their number one priority for why they would support this measure, those two came in roughly equal, right, the same percentage of the population. The amount that supported local streets and roads was even higher than 30%. I can tell you that. It always is. It's the one that you guys hear the most complaints about, and the one that most people are closest to. But we have other needs too, so we're trying to balance all those. And so the polling does in a pretty good way, and I don't have a slide with me tonight, but I'd be glad to show that to you another time if you'd like to see it.
I respect the position you've been in. But I would like to point out in terms of the paratransit and lift line, et cetera, that the polling did go very well from the public standpoint about providing that service. So I think that you will get a good response. And also I'd like to point out that the seniors in this county have a high level response to voting.
We understand that.
Thank you.
Yes.
Dennis, you have any questions?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Stephanie?
When you showed this picture of the wharf-to-wharf race, it reminded me, we talked the other day to see if you could get a vehicle to put on the train tracks to take all those runners back to Santa Cruz.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be cool? You get several hundred at a time instead of all those big long lines of buses.
One of those cars like this.
Yes, they can finish their workout.
No, we put them on a treadmill and they run.
Anyway, it would be, for traffic congestion, it'd be terrific.
Actually, I am talking to Steve gave me the information today. I haven't been able to get a response from the wharf-to-wharf folks, but our rail operator is interested in providing a shuttle train service to do just that.
We have till July, so we have some time.
Yeah, they've got time to do it.
I share the previous comments and the support for Lifeline.
Okay.
Yes, we've had tremendous support for it in this community for 30 years, over 30 years. So what I would like to do is when we, later on, maybe put some language in here to help that. But my question, my question is, do you have any drawings of what the auxiliary lanes in Capitola would look like? And if you can just get back to us on that. But if that's in your plans, what does it look like? And I think we'd all like to.
We've seen that once, but
I'd like to see it again.
Yeah.
You can just send us something.
I'm not quite sure how far along. The design work is not too far along.
Anything conceptual would be.
Yeah, but I will send you what we have.
Yeah.
The next phase is to do the actual final design work, so it's probably about 30% done right now.
So what's going to be the scope of this environmental analysis of rail transit options, this EIR? Is this a different EIR? Or this is the one that you're working on right now?
No, the one we're working on right
Just
now
the
is just
plan.
for the highway.
Yeah.
We're not working on any EIR on the rail line.
So that's coming later, if you
That
get,
would,
if you
that
get
would be,
money. the
that would
money.
be funded from the measure itself. Yeah.
I would hope you could get that cost down. $7 million for an EIR,
Well,
for a
that's-
project that may or may not happen, probably won't happen. People are going to say the government's wasting our money again.
I share your concern. That's the estimate that our consultant gave us that did the feasibility study.
Of course, that's their business.
Well,
They're in the business.
that's true, but I actually, from my experience working in this county now for almost 10 years, it may not be inflated, because to do a fully vetted process that will satisfy the public and satisfy all the governing agencies involved, it may take that much time and effort. We got just deluged with questions when we did the feasibility study, and we didn't really have enough information to answer them all for folks. I think the real interesting thing about that project is that the technology is really evolving rapidly around electric rail. Actually, there's technologies now that are being installed in a few places in Europe where they don't have any overhead wire, but they recharge at every station stop underneath the vehicle itself. It's a combination of batteries and capacitors, and Mike would probably understand that. But it's pretty exciting because it addresses a lot of the issues that people express concerns about: noise, odor. They don't want.
You have to do that. I'm just reflecting what the public's going to say.
But just.
Yeah.
It is, I don't control that,
I know.
but we'll do our best.
I know. The public's going to say you're spending $7 million on an EIR, spend the $7 million
If we can
on my
do it
roads.
for $3, we'll do it for $3,
Yeah. I know. I understand. It's just.
But, the highway one, we're pushing almost $12 million now on that over 13 years. So,
I know.
there's a lot of reasons behind that, but we don't have time for that.
I know.
Any other questions? George, thank you for that very thorough presentation.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, maybe if we have any other questions, we'll call you back up. But for now, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, before I open this up to the public, I just want to have a little clarification note, so we all understand why we're here tonight. What's on our agenda to discuss this is to consider a resolution endorsing the investment plan. And this is, as Mr. Dondero said, the expenditure plan, which is merely consists of the bucket allocations that they came up with. The point that he brought up about what's the next step is the distribution, and that's where I think the question comes in about how the money is going to be allocated between different agencies. And I can assure you that in each one of those buckets, there's going to be distribution questions that we're going to have. And I know that I just got the link today for the agenda for the Rtc meeting. Dennis and I both sit on the Rtc board, so that's another form of clarification. And that meeting is scheduled for February 4th. And to this date, all that's been discussed as far as distribution is between an ad hoc committee, which has thrown out some ideas. We all know how ad hoc committees work about how the money's going to be distributed. But I know that Mr. Dondero does not know that answer, and I can tell you right now that as a commissioner, I don't know that answer either as to how the distribution is actually going to play out. So when we come back and we vote after we hear public comment, we'll just be voting on to whether we agree with the expenditure plan and those percentages in those buckets. Has nothing to do with the distribution at this point.
or the endorsement of the measure necessarily, or does it?
It is going to be an endorsement of the measure. Yeah, now you're endorsing those.
This is more than just us agreeing with the distribution. This is actually endorsing
The expenditure plan, the expenditure plan. Yeah.
Okay, so it is not endorsement of the ballot measure. It is merely an endorsement of.
Well, the ballot measure hadn't been written yet.
I know, no, I understand. I understand. I just want to make that very clear, that it is just the expenditure plan from the ad hoc committee recommendation that we're endorsing.
No, actually, this is not from the ad hoc committee. This was adopted by the RTC.
So this is.
So this
What
is.
are exactly what are we endorsing, George?
You are endorsing this expenditure plan that will guide the ballot measure. The ballot measure language has not been written, but really, this is the heart of the ballot measure.
This got thrown here.
I'm sorry?
So what I was trying to think of is that the expenditure plan equates to the buckets, just to the expenditure plan of the buckets.
But I'm hearing it also equates to the ballot measure, so I want to be very clear here that this body will be endorsing going forward and asking the voters for this money.
So, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Termini, the resolution before you this evening is to endorse the investment plan, and the investment plan is, as the mayor indicated, those buckets. So it's 30% funding for the neighborhood projects, 25% for the highway, 16% for mobility, transit, 15% for the rail trail, and 14% for the rail corridor. That's the action tonight, is to endorse. That's the action that the RTC is asking to endorse that plan, and then it's to encourage the community to support the measure once it's placed on the ballot. So this isn't specifically an endorsement of the ballot measure; it's an endorsement of that investment plan.
I'm feeling like words are being sliced and diced, and that when we finish taking action here tonight, this body will be endorsing and encouraging the public to what is encouraging the public to vote for something other than an endorsement? We're endorsing the ballot measure, are we not? We can just say that and not scare anybody. It's okay, RTC members.
Well, the ballot measure hasn't been written, so it's hard to endorse it legally. What the point I was trying to separate is underneath each bucket, which has not even been decided yet, there will be distribution. And further testimony tonight may lead different positions on the distribution of those funds. And like I said, it would be impossible for us to talk about distribution because it hasn't even been voted on yet.
Even though we're talking about buckets, we're not talking about distribution of the buckets.
That's correct. Correct.
So you'll come back and see us before November and ask us for an official endorsement of the ballot measure.
Of the measure, once it's placed on the ballot by the Board of Supervisors. Yes, I can do that.
And at that time, I feel fairly confident that the distribution will also be resolved.
I would hope so.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Are we all, it was just for clarity.
Okay, well, you're talking about two-step process here. One is that what you see in front of you is the breakdown of the $450 million.
Correct.
That is the breakdown there. What the RTC is coming in front of you and asking, do you accept or do you endorse this breakdown right now? And this decision was actually made by the RTC, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to get as many community groups and city councils to endorse this measure. And yes, there will be some changes in here, not in amounts. I would suspect that these amounts are going to stay the same. This has not been a small process. It's been 2 years to get to this point here, and with a lot of community input. But as far as, for instance, the paratransit, the distribution there may change on who gets what.
And
that may be undecided. But that's really an RTC decision, not a council's decision.
And that was the clarification, the distinction I wanted to make tonight, is that we're going to be voting on the buckets, and the distribution will not even begin to be discussed till at least the meeting on the 4th.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, is everybody clear on that?
Okay.
I know I'd like to hear from the public and then let them weigh in. I just want to give them, for their fairness, just so they know what we know. So please come forward. Welcome back, Mr. Story. It's good to see you back in this building.
Thank you, Mayor. It's a pleasure to be back here. Hello to everyone. Thank you for having me. I have a lot of warm memories just being here. And I haven't been back much, but I did want to come and talk about this investment plan. And first of all, I want to congratulate the RTC and George in moving us forward to be a self-help county. I think this transportation investment plan is sorely needed, and the public, and when it gets time, we should all get behind and support it. But I did want to talk about the buckets, the allocation, and particularly the mobility accessibility. Now, I know there was some discussion that the actual distribution has not been determined, but, you know, I'm looking at the report, the summary of the investment plan, and it has within it the distribution for mobility accessibility. Of that 16%, it states in here that 15% would go to the Metro for their Paracruz program and 1% to Liftline. And so, and maybe I should back up a little bit and say, my name is Sam Story. I'm a resident of Capitola. I worked with Liftline for over 30 years. I was the director of Community Bridges for 14 years. So I know about the services that Liftline provides, and particularly to the population that Liftline provides, and as well as Paracruz. But I can tell you that Liftline serves the most vulnerable, the most low-income seniors and disabled in our county. It's the most flexible service, and Paracruz does a good job, okay? And within the constraints that they work in, but it does not fulfill all the needs that we have, and I'm speaking about medical transportation. And so if we're not yet looking at distribution, let's take this language out now. And because I would like to suggest, because this manner of allocation, from my viewpoint, it does not project forward to be able to meet the needs of that population, the low-income seniors and disabled, who may need medical transportation or health-related transportation that Paracruz cannot provide. Paracruz does not go out of the county to the VA center. Okay, so we need to have another alternative mechanism, and it needs to be well-funded if we're going to meet the needs that are coming in the future. The senior population, the seniors that are 80 and plus by 2030 is one of the fastest growing populations in our society. We should start to anticipate and plan and prepare for that. The other, I think, concern I have is that, and I'm not sure where the ultimate distribution is going to be tied to service increases. Even the language in the survey mentions that it's just to maintain mobility accessibility. I don't think that that puts the ballot measure in the best position to be able to be approved by the public. I think they're not going to want to spend money to just get the same thing. I think that they're going to want to see their money go to being able to increase service. So I believe that, and when the RTC gets to actual determining the distribution, that there'll be a rigorous process that will be defined by where are the services going to be increased, which organization is going to provide the biggest capacity increase in mobility accessibility at the time. I see I've already gone over my time, and I think that two things, it will be beneficial to passing the sales tax measure, because if you look at the survey, actually mobility accessibility polled tied for the highest at 73%. Of the survey respondents said was important or extremely important. I think that that's why attention needs to be paid to making sure that it increases mobility accessibility. And the second thing is, and bringing it all home, in Capitola, we have large numbers of seniors that are in our community. Them being able to access a system that's more flexible, that is less costly for them, so that they can get to the multiple medical and health appointments, which are a critical part of their being able to live a decent quality of life here in Capitola. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you all for your work. I miss you, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak.
Thanks for those comments, Sam. Appreciate that.
Ray Cancino, Community Bridges, CEO. And those are some big shoes to fill. Sam is an incredible person. Tonight I'm just going to keep it really simple. I'm just going to say we are the only paratransit operator that offers door-to-door service for people. We're the only operator that doesn't charge for paratransit services. We're the only operator taking veterans, children with special medical conditions to take them to Santa Clara, Fort Ord Medical Center, Lucille Packard, UCSF Benioff Children's Hospital in San Francisco, because we can't have medical needs that can be met here. We provide over 49% of all paratransit rides, and yet we are only receiving 1% of the funds. I hope you're asking the same question as I am. Why? On top of those comments, the Rtc did vote. The agenda did come out today, so you can see the actual vote. There was a motion that did allow a 15-to-1 percentage as what it's supposed to be, 15 to Metro and 1% to community bridges. That was a motion that was passed at the Rtc level, so I think that you need to be clear that I think you are voting for that thing to stay the same, because it's going to be really hard to undo that unless the Rtc wants to revisit that issue. And that, I think, requires a motion or a recommendation from the City Council to at least have them open the door and ask the question why. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ray. Anyone else from the public? Come on up.
Good evening. My name is Kirk Ants. I'm the program director for Community Bridges Liftline program, and I've been working for them for about 17 years now, and I've been the director for the past 4 years. And my goal is to provide as many paratransit rides to elderly and disabled as possible. So I look at all the means that are available to us, and through the support of the RTC and the TDA funding and our ability to be the designated Consolidated Transportation Service Agency for Santa Cruz County, it gives us the ability to leverage more funding. And we were able in the past 3 years to bring in $800,000 into the community by getting funding for projects that were on the AMBAC want list, which were to do grants to get funding to provide transportation to out-of-county services and same-day services. We're the first agency in the county to be able to provide same-day services, which we still are. But these grants are limited to usually 1 year at a time. The thing with these grants is when they run out, the projects go away. We were able the first year to provide about 6,000 rides with that grant, and through the years, the second year we weren't fully funded, and then the third year was even less, so equals less and less rides. And then finally, on our fourth year for 2016, we will only be providing one driver, so the rides have greatly diminished. So those 4 drivers that we had designated for same day and out of county, we only have one. Additional funding would help us to restore this. We see that this was kind of a pilot project, and it would allow us to continue doing something that we tested and tried and we know works, and it provides the service to these elderly and the seniors that really need it. Now we're down to one driver, and we have to decide how are we going to use this driver. So we kind of split it up between out of county, so we do some North County and some South County. So we do the Fort Ord VA, we go there, and we continue to go to Lucille Packard and Stanford and some of the clinics over in the Bay Areas. So we're thankful that we are able, as the CTSA, to leverage this other funding and establish these programs. And thank you for the great support that Capitola gives the Liftline. I think about that constantly, how much support that you give us, and we take those funds and provide as many paratransit rides as we can. So I really want to thank you for your support, and thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate those. Anyone else from the public? Seeing none, we'll bring it back for discussion.
Perhaps either Dennis or yourself, Mr. Mayor, can clarify the idea that the first time we spoke, and I'm not seeing anything in the report that speaks to it, that it was just the gross percentages of the tax measure. And from what Sam has told us, it's a little more granular than that. What exactly are we voting on tonight?
Would you like me to answer that? Or?
We're voting to support the investment plan as is proposed on the sheet here.
Explain the investment plan, because it's not, I'm hearing what Sam is saying is that it's more, there are more line items in here that we're supporting, such as the Paracruz lift line.
Here's what we can do with this, Mike. I have a solution to this, is that we can support the tax measure, and what we do is we take out the percentages to both Community Bridges and Santa Cruz Metro. This is really an item that needs to be dealt with at the RTC level. So if we take out the percentages, we open that door and we send a message back with George is that we would like the RTC to look at, again, at the percentages that are offered to both these agencies. And then we can approve the whole tax measure here without that item being in there.
I just want to weigh in from the RTC bit right there. Just for clarification, that's what I was trying to get to. The area we're talking about is the mobility section. Okay, we're voting on all the buckets. At the last RTC meeting when we came to do this, I made a motion to raise the mobility section to 19%. It was originally at 15, okay? With the intent of reading that from the expenditure comes the distribution, and that's what I think the people from Community Bridges are here representing is it's not the bucket, it's the distribution of the bucket. So when I realized that the 15% bucket was going to be split up, the motion was made to go to 19%. Keep in mind that when I do this motion to raise it to 19%, I'm asking 4 other sacred cows to give up either a percent here or 2% there.
I don't understand.
And in a body of, is there 10 of us, George? 12. 12 people that are all there representing their issues, that motion fell flat.
No doubt.
Okay. I had no support. I had no second. The best I could get was a counter proposal to 16%, which at that point I felt it was a major victory. But just for clarification is we did vote for 16%. We did not vote for 15 and 1.
Yes, you did.
We did vote for 15 and 1? Well, that becomes clear to me, news to me, because at the time there was a comment made. Hang on a second, I'll let you come. If he says we voted for it, then that's what it is. But the intention there was that I believe Don Lane from Santa Cruz said, I want to try to keep Metro whole at 15.
At 15. So
right. But what was not in there was that there's that Community Bridges all along was, I believe, at 1.32. So it was a false vote anyway at that point to say that 16 would keep everybody whole because it wasn't accurate. And I'll go ahead and say that here because I was misled at that point about what was going on, because when the first question I asked is when we said 16, what did we do? Did we give Metro 14.72 or
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
It's not a question, it was confusion, okay? And like I said, but the fact remains, if you state that we did vote for 16-1, 16 and it was 15-1, is that how you interpreted that vote?
Yes.
Okay.
I think if you read the minutes, I mean, that was the motion that I remember Mr. Lane made.
Right.
And he said he wanted to keep Santa Cruz, Paracruz whole at 15%.
Right.
And give 1% to Community Bridges. So
that
was our understanding. That's the way it was recorded.
I understand. I understand what you're saying, George. And okay. If that's the way it's written, that's how it's written.
That's how it's.
And that's. I guess what I'm trying to show you is how fragile this whole operation is, and how each percentage is weighed heavily.
I'm just trying to figure out what we're voting on, and I keep on hearing that it's a gross percentage, and yet I'm hearing conflicting testimony with regard to how it is, and perhaps the city manager.
Let me take another crack at trying to clarify here. The Transportation Investment Plan, which is specifically what you're endorsing in item 1 in the resolution, are those 5 buckets. Those 5 buckets that we talked about before: local roads, rail, highway, mobility, and rail trail. That's what you're endorsing today. And I do believe that when the ballot language is actually crafted and there's additional details about how the 16% gets divvied up at the final decision, how the 30%, we haven't even talked about it this evening, but the 30% for neighborhood projects gets divvied up. Those are some of the details that are going to come later. At this stage, I think what George is asking for is just the support of those overall buckets. And the notion that we would all go in together and the highway is our issue, we need to become a self-help county, we need to find a way to take care of the rail line, we need to find a way to build those rail trails, all those projects benefit us. I think beyond that, that is increased granularity. That's going to develop in due time. It hasn't been finalized until we end up seeing the ballot language.
Right, but is it true or not that the backstory to this financing plan are motions that are passed by the RTC with regard to the individual account being distributed? And I'm just using Metro and Paracruz as an example, truly in fear that there are other things in motion here that we're calling out in favor of that we're not really sure how it's being.
So I want to be clear about that. Metro, as the executive director and the mayor have indicated, did make an allocation between. RTC made an allocation between Metro and the lift line program, 15% and 1%. That's the recommendation right now. That's not actually before you. So until the ballot language is done, you're not going to actually see what the final figure is, and that's why the representatives from Community Bridges are still lobbying, because that number could still change. Again, on the 30% local funding, there's a measure in front of the RTC, and I've been in a lot of conversations with our RT representatives about how that funding could be distributed. We may have different opinions. Until we see the ballot language, that's not going to be decided. So right now, maybe the best thing to do is just to pare the resolution down to endorsing the investment plan. We take out item 2, and then it's very clear, and then when there's actually a ballot initiative, then it can come before you. Then you can either endorse it or not and encourage residents to support it.
Great. Thank you. I can make a motion at the start.
Can I just...
Before, go ahead. I'm going to let Tony speak, and then Stephanie was going to talk.
I have a comment.
Yeah.
Just to make it perfectly clear, item 1 of the resolution states that the council endorses the approved transportation investment plan in reference to the action taken by the board at their December 3rd meeting. And so I think that sentence also ought to be modified to say endorses an investment plan consisting of the following 5 categories, and then lists the 5 categories as they're listed in the resolution.
Great. Okay. We'll get to that. Stephanie, you had a comment.
I was just going to suggest that we add number 3 onto the resolution also. Number 2 is encourage the community to support the measure, and number 3, that we support the expansion of paratransit services with all new money.
With all what, Stephanie?
All new money. So whatever paratransit, whatever lift line gets and whatever Metro gets has to be used for new service. People don't want to pay for something and then not have more service. So
that's a hard one at this point.
I don't know if that's
get my head around.
Able to.
Well, it sends a message to the RTC members.
Well, you have two representatives on the RTC, and I'm thinking that maybe an option for you might be to defer this decision until some of there's 2 questions that haven't been determined that I think concern you. One is regarding the paratransit division. I mean, that was decided by the RTC as 15 and 1%. Now, can they change that? Yes. The other decision that has not been made that will be taken up next Thursday is how to divide the 30% amongst the cities in the county, which I think you also have a high interest level in.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And maybe it would be better if I come back after that decision is made, because what we really want, we don't want you to start tinkering with the expenditure plan. We need to know if you fully endorse it, because that's a message that we can take to the voters and say all 4 cities or 3 of the 4 cities or however it turns out support this. As well as the county.
But that's the problem when you take a big plan like that and you bring it before individual bodies where we haven't had the chance to hear the discussion, be part of the discussion, weigh in, and so forth. And so maybe we need to have more discussions from the representatives on the RTC on things, so we can weigh in on these things, in a little more timely fashion, because, I mean, I think what Mike's alluding to is that, there may be some things in here that we don't like, and maybe we don't want to support it.
Well, that's why Dennis is very clean motion.
I
feel
know.
good about that.
Right.
I know.
Dennis, go ahead.
Okay, I'm going to simplify the process a little bit here, is that we, my motion would be that with Tony's add-in, that we support the transportation investment plan. And what we do is, on the mobility access, we take the percentages out that service providers will be Santa Cruz Metro and Community Bridges. We're not committing to supporting the amounts that were given, and that we do a recommendation that to the RTC that they look at the distribution of those allocations.
Well, that was what my number 3 was.
Okay.
Would be, that we make a recommendation to the RTC.
Okay, that makes it real simple, and also it gives George approval of this plan here, and we can get back to it. And it's really going to be the RTC's decision on the distribution of that. It's not going to be this body's decision on that, so.
It'll be our decision whether or not we endorse it when it finally comes to us.
Of course, but, we can make a recommendation, and that's why I put the language in there that new money should go for new service, because otherwise they can say, oh, yeah, we'll look at it, and, oh, okay, well, we'll give Lifeline, another 0.5%. Well, that doesn't solve the problem. That doesn't deal with it. What we need is for the new money to provide new services, and that will,
They're having that discussion over at Metro, very soon, and I don't know, I mean, they have to decide how, they have to say something about how they want to spend the money. RTC has not put any, specific conditions on it. They've just said that it's to support paratransit, because we know that there's a great need for that. So that, as your capacity on the Metro board, that's another question to take up at that
Right.
board.
I think, I'll go ahead and weigh in now. I mean, I have, obviously, I'm struggling with this distribution also, okay? And where I'm at is, I think I'm with you, and that is, what really needs to happen in this county is we need to embrace this measure, okay? Because without becoming self-help, we cut ourselves off tremendously from all future funds. So the most important thing we do is to support and pass this measure, send the message to our residents to support this measure, and how we tweak the distribution of these funds, we all know what our priorities are. I think we all are in agreement about how we feel about where our funds should go. And I don't know if this is the time to put the stipulation in. I think we can make, as Dennis said, there was a small recommendation about, that we don't, whatever the language you used about the 15 and 1, I think it would be okay to include something like that. But the message we need to send away from here for the RTC and for our residents is that if we want to start improving our roads and Highway 1 and possibly the trail and the Sanctuary Trail and, paratransit, is that we need to embrace this bill and we need to, move from there. So
But it needs to be fair, too, and that's why, they can't treat these agencies that desperately, that differently.
Well, I
That's
think
just
Dennis
really
alluded to
unfair.
that. I think Dennis' motion.
I took it out there, Stephanie, so we're
Oh,
taking
I know,
away the
I
percentages.
know, but I'm just saying, what are they going to do now? They're going to say,
Well, that's
what we did. And
I don't
that's-
think it's for us to decide that.
No, but we can make a statement, and that's why I say, let's make a strong statement about what our preference is, not just say to them, look at it. But that's why I said if we put language in a resolution that's clear, they can say, that's what Capitola said. They'll still say, so what? And they don't care. But, I mean, it's in writing, it's in a resolution, it's a little more formal. If you have another idea,
Go ahead, John.
happy to hear it.
Why don't we split the concerns here and vote just on what Dennis said? I haven't heard a second yet. And then, Stephanie, let's entertain a resolution from you to talk about our intent. I think it's pretty clear here that this board is in support of providing this transportation for the needy. As Sam said, this is a very frail population. The county doesn't do that for free. So there's many reasons why Capitola has been long-term support of this particular program. So I would love to hear a motion from you, and I'll probably second it. But let's do the first one first that Dennis did, and I'd like to second that with the exclusion of the 15 and the 1%.
Let me check with the city attorney. Are we within the purview of this agenda item to make a resolution on top of that? Recommendation.
It was my understanding that you were talking about clarifying what the council is approving by way of this resolution. And the two things that I've heard are that the council first is accepting the 5 buckets of funds and how those expenditures are going to be allocated, but not the 15% and 1% division between Metro and community bridges.
That's correct.
So as you were talking about that, I made a couple of notes to myself. First would be to revise the first sentence of paragraph 1 to say that the council endorses an investment plan consisting of the following 5 categories of expenditure, and then lists the 5 categories, but as to subcategory C, which says 16% for mobility access, I added at the end of accessible transportation primarily for seniors, people with disabilities, and veterans, subject to a final determination on the allocation to service providers.
That's good.
Yeah. We're not asking to change the 16%. What we're asking for is to look at the distribution.
The distribution of it.
Yeah.
And that's your motion, Dennis?
That's my motion.
And you second that?
I just want to ask, George, is it fine with you?
It
may not be everything you want, but...
Don't ask him.
Okay, I'm sorry, but...
Withdraw that ask.
Okay.
He didn't ask.
I think it's good. I think it's good.
Okay.
You think it's good? I think you're going to accomplish what you want. We may have to come back and ask you again later after all this other gets just...
I think that's what we feel comfortable doing as a council, and that's what's important here, and we'll let that fall where it does. So,
Okay.
And just so that I'm not confused, my assumption is that item 2, encourage the communities to support the measure once it's placed on the ballot, is acceptable to the council.
Yes.
As part of the resolution. Okay, thank you.
Okay. That was great discussion and great input. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously for the RTC. George, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so the question is how to get the message to the RTC from us.
Well,
So
you have
whether-
2 representatives right here that are going to take that message.
Great. Great. Well, yeah. No, I think, I just think it's an issue of fairness. And whenever, you have new money, everybody fights about it. And, in this county, the county gets the most because when we allocate it by population, the county gets the most, Santa Cruz gets the next, and Capitola and Soquel, and Scotts Valley and Watsonville, get the rest.
Perhaps our representatives can come back and report to us at the next RTC meeting and maybe explain to me at a future meeting, not tonight, what keeping Metro whole means when we're talking about brand-new money.
Yeah. That's the point here, is when you have new money, it's an opportunity to do things you haven't done before, and that's what we want to use it for. And that's what we've talked about here, is that, it's sort of one-time money, and let's not put it into operations, let's do the bandstand or, whatever. And so that's kind of my thinking on this is, it's a long shot it's going to pass anyway, I think, and there's so much controversy over it, but people desperately want the roads fixed and, the highways widened and so forth. A lot of people do.
Well, keep the glass half full.
Well, I think the big point is that Dennis and I have an obligation now to report back more. We'll put more on the agenda to keep everyone informed. As this progresses over the next 10 months, or whatever the time is, we need to be more informed about every decision, every ad hoc committee, and where we're at. Obviously, there was some confusion here on my part, so we'll have to go back and make sure we're accurate.
Here's the choice. You get this, or you get this. And so think 10 years or 15 years in this county.
I think
that's what the voters have to decide.
That's what's important.
Because
okay. But there are essential services that we need to continue to provide, and I think that's where we put our heads together, and I think we just did that as a body. We just sent the message out, and we were your first group you've talked to. I think that's good. I think that maybe the other agencies can weigh in on that and say, you know what, we need to.
Have we learned something here tonight, George?
Okay, good. With that,
all of us. Right?
With that, we stand adjourned. Thank you very much.
Good job.